Welcome to A Minute with Marty. I'm Marty Haynes with HFC Insurance, and we have a great topic today that affects every business. And the title today is, How do you know what to pay to attract and retain employees? And today, to talk about that topic, we have Becky Drozdz, HR and compensation consultant with Guerrilla HR. That is a great name for a business. And Becky, glad to have you today.
Thank you, Marty. It's a pleasure to be here.
That said, you got a name like that for a business. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yes, of course. So I am Becky Drozdz, and I am the founder of Guerrilla HR. I really got my start in HR as a generalist. So I sat in that generalist role, manager, business partner, and moved up through the ranks within HR before moving over to the consulting side. And so for the past several years, I've really focused on project work, supporting different employers and figuring out really what do we pay? That's really my sweet spot. And so I started Guerrilla HR in order to provide that service. And since you mentioned it, I will tell you, Guerrilla HR is really inspired by the concept of guerrilla warfare. So I think about the way organizations operate with a lot of bureaucracy, and sometimes it's slow to make policy changes, even when the people on the ground who are, managing employees and trying to hire day to day are having a hard time. So I think it's really peeling that back and being able to give people the empowerment they need to say, hey, we need to be able to make some changes. We know what we're living day to day, and we need to be proactive, and we need to be able to act quickly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what took me to Guerrilla HR.
Okay, awesome. What you do, because I know you have a niche, and that niche is the compensation piece. And I think that's a great niche for the simple fact is HR, people like me, it's great to have the right information and know what's a good package, because it's better to know and get the right data than it is to take a dart and throw it at a dartboard and just, figure, you're getting it right when a lot of times you may not be getting it right. Yeah. So kind of break that down. If it's somebody like me and I go, look, I'm trying to hire a salesperson, and I need to, and along a salesperson, I need to make sure my support staff is compensated the right and for our market, because I'm sure that changes everywhere. So give me an idea how that looks.
So really the first question I would ask you is, what's your philosophy around compensation? And what I mean by that is, do you want to be matching the market? So you pay what you need to, but you're not over, you're not under. That's where most employers say, that's where I want to be. I don't want to be on that too high or too low side. But on the flip side, you might say, no, I want to lead. I know that I need these people. I can't afford to have people churning and coming in and going out. And then I have this gap where I'm not able to provide the service that I need to my customers. So I'm going to pay a little bit more in order to keep that talent. I don't want to mess with it. That's what I'm going to do. And I've seen that often in the tech space, where we have skills where people need to be able to get that talent in that's constantly growing and upgrading those skills kind of in that tech side. But I've also seen it in manufacturing, where I've had employers who say, I just can't afford to have my lines go down because I can't get, basic labor to do this work. So I'm going to lead the market. I'm going to pay over what I have to just so I can get people and keep them. Of course, on the flip side, we've got some that say, I need to be behind. And often if you have a startup, maybe you just don't have the capital resources, or you're investing your dollars elsewhere, you say, I've got to be a little bit behind. And I know that, but I might look at some other things that I can offer in my total rewards package that are going to be a little bit more desirable. So it really is building everything together. Yeah. But that first part really is just figuring out, where do you want to be?
Yeah. So that's, you kind of touched on it. If it's a dollar amount, you may not be able to match, but you may be able to tweak your benefits package. I mean, it's kind of an all-in kind of thing to go there. So, so that's good to know. Now, how people are. You go online and you try and search for data and stuff. What's the benefit of using a service like you?
For sure. So I think the internet has brought us many wonderful things. And part of that is that it has brought us information, but not necessarily knowledge. And so there are all these bits of data out there, but we don't necessarily know how to use it. So really the first step, once we kind of know what the philosophy is to gather data. Not all data is created equally. There's a ton of info out there that's free, that's crowdsourced. And if you have nothing else, Would I start there? Yes, of course I would. But I also have access to some other resources that are essentially I'm buying into them. I'm purchasing access to this data. And this is all employer reported data. And it
Okay.
is all based on matching job descriptions. It's really important that we don't focus simply on job titles, but that we really look at what are people doing? What are we expecting them to show up and do on a day-to-day basis? And what are the essential skills that they need to have in order to perform that job? Once I know that, then I can go out and look for that data. The other thing we have to think about though is where are you attracting talent and where are you losing talent? And
Mm,
what I mean by that is that we want to think about the market. If you're recruiting solely in the Charlotte area, then that's the data we want to use. If you're looking to hire positions all over the country, then that's the data we need to
mhm,
use. So we really need to know what's our scope? What are we competing against when it comes to talent? So that's something we've got to narrow down.
mhm.
Then within all of these different data sources, then we can start to pull out. So we want to, again, make sure that we have valid, statistically sound data, that it's employer reported, and that it's based on job duties. Then we can gather that information and put it together to figure out the going rate. Now, have you ever looked at pages of comp data or ever gone out on the internet and tried to find any comp data?
Yeah.
Yeah. And often there's a whole lot of numbers.
Yep.
It's not usually one neat, clean number.
Correct.
So data cuts are reported in a lot of different ways. The one that I like to use is the median or the 50th percentile. So when you look at comp data, you might see an average or you might see a weighted average. I
Mhm.
like that 50th percentile or median because what that means is that they lined up all of the numbers that are reported, lowest to highest, and the one that's smack dab in the middle is the number that's being reported. I like to use that when making comp decisions and when we're looking at the market because it's not going to be skewed by outliers. So you might have an employer that truly is paying really high or really low. And if we use an average, it's going to skew that data. So
Mhm.
for that reason, I like to take the median and then I pull those together. I think ideally you'd have three sources. Again, there are some that you can buy into, but there are some free ones that are good as well. So the government has a site. It's actually called onetonline.org. So
Okay.
onetonline.org. And that is a site that is put out by the Department of Labor and using Bureau of Labor Statistics data. And so that is a free resource that will give you some statistically sound, valid data. So if you have nothing else, that's a good
Mhm.
starting point.
Okay.
Then again, it's gathering that additional information from some other sound sources if you got it, but that's a good starting place. And
Okay.
so that's where I would kind of get that first number.
Now, does this in the scope of where you are, is that if I'm a does it matter whether I'm a manufacturer, whether I'm in IT and services, does that matter?
Oh, I love that question. That is such a great question. So, yes and no. So, I would think about the positions that you're hiring in the sense of transferable skills. Let's say that you are hiring an admin. They're going to be doing maybe some filing for you, maybe some document control, maybe kind of doing that intake of calls, figuring out where they need to go. They could go do that at a law firm. They could do it at a school. They could do it at a retail store. They could go do that anywhere. So, in a job like that, where we've got really very transferable skills, then I would say you don't want to get too specific on your industry. But if you have something that's really niche and people are really only going to be coming from that area, that's really the only kind of other industry you're going to be recruiting from. Or if people leave you, that's where they go. Then yes, I might get a little bit more specific. But sometimes I get people that will say, I manufacture pink piggy banks and I only want to look
Mhm.
at operators who manufacture pink piggy banks. Well, if they manufacture a blue piggy bank, they could probably come figure out how to make your pink one as well. So, I don't like it when people get so specific and then they're really missing out on the bigger picture of what's happening in the labor market.
Okay, this might be a
So it
real
depends.
okay. Then this might
Yeah.
be a really weird question. And we've gone through a time where wages have gone up. There's been this pressure on wages. Now, it's say 5 years from now, that pressure is no longer there and it's down. Do you go back in and reevaluate?
Yeah. So I think that you do need to evaluate every few years. So when I do a comp study, if I'm looking across an organization, looking at all of their jobs, they're not going to do that every year and they don't need to, but they need to watch for the trends, just like you're talking about what's happening with the cost of labor. And we have seen bigger shifts in the last couple of years. Last year, 4.5% increase in cost of labor overall, much greater than we've seen historically. So you would need to know if I did a study this year and I gathered all of this data and I know what that market's doing, then I would say, okay, I need to adjust that number by 4.5% for next year because that's the shift that we're seeing in the cost of labor. After you've gone for a couple years, then you need to really go back into that more detailed analysis, because then we might have some other trends that are happening. We might have, different jobs that are having a bigger upswing, and that could be because of the lack of talent that's coming out. Maybe it's some kind of new technology, and so it doesn't have that same supply. So I think you can do a study. It's good for a couple years as long as you're watching the trends, and then
Yeah.
you go back and revisit.
Okay. So that was my next follow-up question is how often do you go back and how often do you do a review? Okay, so you do one for somebody
Mhm.
in the month of February. Is that good for a year, 2 years? What's your recommendation on when you review these numbers?
Yeah, so I think of a comp plan as kind of like a plant. It's a living, breathing thing. You can't just do it one time, set it on the shelf, and ignore it. So I think that you need to pull it out at least once a year, dust it off, and make sure, are we keeping up with changes in the cost of labor in general? And if you have any positions where suddenly you're having a really hard time filling jobs, you're seeing a lot of turnover, well, now you have a problem area. And so those I would look at as they come up. But I think you could go up to 3 years without doing a full study, as long as you're tracking and watching for those annual trends and making adjustments.
Okay. All right. That's pretty good. It is something to watch. It is something that a lot of people struggle with to try and figure out what that number is, instead of just, I need to raise my hourly rate $3 an hour, or just it's
Yeah.
good to have the numbers, and it's good to
Yeah.
know that somebody like you that has that niche that you fall in, that's what you do, in
Yeah.
order to help, especially small business, so that
Oh, for sure.
they have an avenue.
And I think one of the things that happens, particularly in that small business side, is that people have a concept or a conception of the way that things happen or what they feel comfortable as giving an increase. And so what I really am talking about there is, let's say you've had an employee that, even if you're small, you've had them for several years and you've given them maybe 3% per year. And so then when we come back and we look at the market, you find that you have this really valued employee. Well, now they're behind the market, and not through anything intentional, just because what you budgeted year over year didn't fully keep up with the market. And so that's something that we see that happens, where that small employer might need to say, I really value this person and I don't want to lose them over a couple dollars. And that's where having the data can help give the
Mhm.
justification to say, this is why we need to make this change or give this market adjustment. Because if that person leaves, it's really going to hurt my
Right.
organization.
Exactly. That I agree with that 100%. Okay. Well, good deal. Well, Becky, this is some great stuff. I know this particular topic is going to help out a lot of small business owners. Is there one last piece of nugget before we end today?
I would say that the other thing I would think about is just talk to your people. One of the things that I don't know, it still surprises me when I have an employer come and say, "I had somebody who left and they left for money," and I'm just shocked about it. You shouldn't be shocked. I tell employers, you should not be surprised when somebody leaves. So my advice, my nugget is, talk to your people and find out what they need. Because part of it might be, maybe it's in the benefit space. When we're thinking about total rewards and that comp and benefits and the other things that you offer, part of it's your work environment and things like that. Talk to your people and find out what they need, so that when you invest your dollars, you're investing it in an area that has an impact on your employees.
Exactly. Good deal. Well, Becky, this is some awesome stuff. I appreciate you taking the time today to educate a lot of businesses, and I'm sure they are thankful.
Thank you, Marty. I appreciate being able to come and chat with you.
All right, good deal. Well, everybody else, her number will be on the screen. Definitely reach out to Becky. You will not regret it. And but again, appreciate you watching A Minute with Marty today. We hope you have a good day. Take care.